profit from it.
As a woman, I feel marginalized in this church, marginalized by the late Pope.
This Pope didn't care to learn from the likes of women.
The sisterhood, not digging the Pope. Anyway, our next guest is a columnist for Vanity Fair, rabble-rousing author of Love, Poverty, and War. I think in all the years I've been interviewing people, and that's maybe 20 now, the two most appreciable intellects I've ever run across are William Buckley and Christopher Hitchens, and I happen to like Hitchens' writing style a little better. Please welcome Christopher Hitchens, ladies and gentlemen. Chris, you fearlessly go where some won't. Now, I know in the old church, literally, when somebody was up for sainthood and stuff like that, there was somebody who would play the official, it's where the phrase comes from, devil's advocate. Am I correct?
You would have been correct until the last few years of this Pope, who abolished the office of Advocatus Diaboli, devil's advocate. And fast-tracked candidates of his own, including some very weird people, for beatification and for sainthood. So one of the most famous institutions of the church, the one that tried to restrain mere superstition and cultism, was abolished by him to clear the road for cults of personality.
Well, shoot the Pope through the prism of maybe, what did you think of this Pope now and his demise?
Well, I could add to just what I just said by saying, look, he did ask me to testify against the beatification of Mother Teresa, and I did go to do that. And thus, I suppose, became the first person ever to represent the devil pro bono, without an advocate, which is a distinction of a kind. So I have to thank him. He was broad-minded enough for that. But he made more saints than all his 10 predecessors, I think I'm right in saying, combined and doubled. And I think he did that for this reason. He had to apologize to the Jews for the Holocaust. He apologized to the Muslims for the Crusades. He had to apologize to Orthodox Catholic Christians, not Roman Catholic Christians, for butchering them in the Balkans and Byzantium and elsewhere. He had to do a lot of climbing down. But of course he was infallible on everything else.
All right.
And one way of rallying the faithful in a time of doubt is to make lots of saints and stress the issue of martyrdom. It's a cheap trick, but it seems to have, it's a horrible thing to say, but it worked.
Well, let me ask you this, Chris. What is it in your growing up, Christopher, I'm sorry, I always do that, and I know you want to be called Christopher. Christopher, what is it in your growing up or background that would make you even care to act as Little John at the bridge, keeping people from canonization or sainthood? Why would you go and testify? You just felt it was improper that Mother Teresa was made a saint, right?
Well, you know, she was a fraud and a fanatic and a fundamentalist, and therefore I think not, as we sometimes say, a good role model. She took money from Charles Keating of the Lincoln Savings and Loan. She justified the Duvalier dictatorship. She said that contraception was murder and that abortion was the greatest threat to world peace. She was a fanatic.
Don't you have to give a pass, though, to any...
Mind you, of course, you're quite right in asking me. I mean, it's none of my business who the Pope chooses to make a saint. I'm not a Catholic. But then, if I'm not a Catholic, why do I have to watch, with exceptions like you, a mass media that has for a whole week acted as if this was a Catholic country and we were all mourning our dear leader? I mean, if we're going to be treated like that, then someone has to push back and say this is not so.
Well, listen, I'm enamored of the Pope in most of the symbolic ways everybody has. He seemed like a man of peace, and when a man of peace passes, I'm saddened like anybody else in this world gone mad. My feeling is, though, that at the end, I'm adamant about this fact. If there's one reason for a church to exist, it's to protect the innocents. And we have priests going after kids in this culture, like, unbelievably. And the fact that I had an old guy in there who probably would have died if they had told him about much of this makes me long for a newer, more cranky Pope who's going to walk the beat and swing the nightstick more.
I completely second those who were just applauding, but unfortunately it didn't break his heart when he found out. He knew that Cardinal Bernard Law was moving around sadistic predators, concealing their activities from the police, which it was his job to disclose, inflicting them on parishes where he knew they would attack again, and covering up for them. This is one of the gravest crimes in the calendar. This is the sort of crime that would make an atheist fear he was going to go to hell. It's the one thing no one can tolerate. Cardinal Law, who should be facing trial in Boston, is instead a fugitive from justice in Rome, given a special sinecure and a place of refuge by His Holiness the Pope. He can't get out of that. That's wickedness. It's also, in my view, wickedness to say that condoms are more nasty and more dangerous than the AIDS virus, which was the Pope's official position. It's lucky for him that he isn't going to face judgment, because if he did, he'd have a lot of people's deaths on his conscience, as well as the rape and torture of a lot of children. These are things I wouldn't want to have to go to my grave with, even if I was sure there was no afterlife. And no one will say this week. It's all piety, it's all Pope all the time. And what about when you say man of peace? This is the guy who invited Saddam Hussein's chief henchman to the Vatican a couple of weeks before Saddam was removed, and fawned on him and called him a man of peace. That's Tariq Aziz, another wanted torturer and mass murderer. This is a pretty grim record.
Well, Chris, you better hope so, or you're going to hell if not.
Well, all the most amusing people seem to be bound the same way.
Hey, Chris, what about the prince's wedding? You excited for this? You flying over? Are you in the wedding ceremony this weekend?
What wedding? No, this is sad. Can I just say one thing?
Yes, sir.
This is in my lapel. This is the flag of Kurdistan. You remember how people used to say, if you continue to jeer weeks, months, years back about Iraq, saying, I think we're going to have Jeffersonian democracy there. You remember that smear and sneer? Well, today we have President Jalal Talabani, a heroic resistance fighter and leader of the Kurdish people. And, the United States has never had a Jewish or a black president to this day, for all its Jeffersonian talk. And Iraq has moved from extreme minority fascist rule to majority rule, and its first president is a member of an oppressed minority. I think that deserves a round of applause, don't you?
Listen, I will not even pretend to be as wise as to think that I saw these things coming, but these are the things I hoped for when we launched this invasion, and now some of them are coming true, and I agree with you completely. I know you've been a backer, proponent of the Kurds for a long time, and yeah, this certainly tells us that the game is afoot over there. It's good to see. Christopher, good to see you, my friend. Up next, we'll find out. Top reporter Bobby Oshak goes to Vegas.